Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something I think we all crave, happiness. But not just, the fleeting kind that comes and goes. We're talking about the deep, lasting contentment. You know, the kind Eckhart Tolle talks about? Ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
He's the spiritual teacher with a really unique take on finding true happiness.
Absolutely.
So get ready for some serious aha moments because his ideas might just turn, what you thought you knew about happiness upside down.
Yeah, I think Tolle's approach is really about going beyond the surface level. We often fall into this trap of thinking, like, I'll be happy when I get that new car or when I finally get that promotion.
Right, right.
But what if true happiness isn't about reaching those external milestones?
Yeah, that's what I find so intriguing about it. What if we've been looking for happiness in all the wrong places? I mean, think about a time when you were truly unhappy. Were you obsessing over something you wanted but didn't have? Or stuck to dwelling on something that already happened? Tolle suggests that this focus on anything but the present moment
Mm.
is actually what causes a lot of our suffering.
It's such a powerful insight. He Tolle believes that true happiness is an inner state of being, not something dependent on external circumstances.
Hmm.
So he argues that chasing happiness based on things like possessions or achievements is like chasing a mirage. It keeps us constantly striving, but we never truly arrive.
Oh, totally. It's almost like we're on this never-ending treadmill.
Right.
We think, okay, if I just achieve this one more thing, then I'll finally be happy. But then we achieve it, and there's always another goalpost, another thing to chase. It's exhausting.
Oh, it is. And that's where the concept of presence comes in. Tolle really emphasizes the importance of being fully engaged in this moment, rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Have you ever noticed how much of your day is spent lost in thought, replaying conversations or planning for what's next?
Oh, all the time. It's like my mind is on autopilot, and I'm missing out on what's actually happening around me. Sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it until someone points it out.
Yeah, it happens to all of us. But when we start to become more aware of those thought patterns, without judgment, something really interesting happens. We begin to create a space between ourselves and that mental chatter. We realize we're not our thoughts. We're the awareness that's observing them.
It's like we're finally taking a step back and seeing the bigger picture.
Right,
We're no longer completely consumed by that internal drama.
exactly. And in that space, in that separation from the constant stream of thoughts, a deeper sense of peace and contentment can emerge. It's not about stopping thoughts altogether,
Yeah.
which is pretty much impossible, but rather changing our relationship to them. We become the observer, the witness to our mental activity.
So it's less about silencing the mind and
Right.
more about not letting it run the show.
Right. That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to another key player in this whole happiness equation, the ego.
Okay, let's unpack this. When I hear ego, I think of someone who's, arrogant or self-centered. But I have a feeling Tolle's talking about something a bit different.
You're right. It's not about being egotistical in the traditional sense. Tolle describes the ego as this, part of us that's constantly striving, comparing, and seeking validation. It's that voice in our heads that tells us we're not good enough, not successful enough, not enough.
Right, it's like that inner critic we all have,
Right.
always pointing out our flaws and what we're lacking. I know that voice can be a real downer sometimes, especially when I let it get the best of me.
And that's the thing. The ego thrives on more.
Yeah.
It defines itself through doing, achieving,
Yeah.
and accumulating. So it's never truly satisfied. It's always looking for the next thing to fixate on, the next thing to make us feel complete. But because this feeling of completeness is always just out of reach, the ego keeps us stuck in this cycle of desire and disappointment.
So how do we escape that cycle? Do we have to fight the ego or try to silence that inner critic?
It's not so much about fighting the ego as it is about becoming aware of it. Tolle suggests we just observe that egoic chatter without judgment. Just imagine it like watching clouds drift by in the sky. You see them, you acknowledge them, but you don't get swept away by them.
Okay, so instead of engaging in a wrestling match with our thoughts, we're kind of taking a step back and just observing them.
Exactly. We're creating a space, a detachment that allows us to see those thoughts for what they are, just mental events, not the ultimate truth about ourselves. And in that space, that's where we can start to tap into a deeper sense of peace and happiness.
That makes sense. It's like those thoughts have less power over us when we're not so entangled with them. But how do we actually cultivate that awareness? I mean, it's easy to say just observe your thoughts, but it feels a lot harder to put into practice.
You're absolutely right. It does take practice.
Mm.
But one of the most powerful tools Tolle offers is the practice of presence. Remember we talked about how much of our day is spent lost in thought. either dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Presence is about bringing our attention fully to this moment, to what's happening right now.
So it's like hitting the pause button on that mental time travel and just being here in the now. What are some ways to actually do that?
Oh, there are so many simple yet profound ways. It could be as easy as focusing on your breath. Notice the sensation of each inhale and exhale, or feel the ground beneath your feet as you walk, or really savor each bite of food, paying attention to the taste and texture.
It's almost like engaging all of our senses, right?
Yeah.
Really tuning into the physical experience of being alive in this moment. I can see how that could help quiet the mental chatter.
Exactly. And as we practice presence, it naturally leads to another key practice, acceptance. Think about a time when you were resisting something, maybe a traffic jam, a difficult conversation, or even bad weather. How did that resistance make you feel?
Oh, totally stressed and frustrated. It's like I was adding fuel to the fire by fighting against something I couldn't control anyway.
Exactly. And that's what Tolle points out. Resistance creates suffering. It's like swimming upstream. But when we accept things as they are, without judgment, we align ourselves with the natural flow of life. It doesn't mean we have to like everything that happens, but it means we stop fighting against reality.
So it's about letting go of the need to control everything and choosing to embrace what is, even if it's not what we want it to be.
That's it. And it's not about being passive or giving up. It's actually a very powerful shift in perspective. Tolle calls it radical acceptance. It's about acknowledging the present moment with all its messiness and imperfections and saying yes to it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. Presence helps us to observe our thoughts and practice acceptance. And the more we practice acceptance, the more present we become. It's like a positive feedback loop.
You got it. And there's one more practice that ties everything together, releasing attachment to outcomes. Think about it. How much of your happiness is contingent on things turning out exactly the way you want them to?
Probably more than I'd like to admit. I definitely have a tendency to get fixated on the specific result. And if it doesn't happen, I feel disappointed.
It's a common trap. We get so attached to a certain outcome, whether it's getting a promotion, finding the perfect partner, or even winning a game, that we miss out on the journey. And even if we do achieve the desired outcome, that happiness is often fleeting because there's always another goal to chase.
So how do we release that attachment? It's one thing to understand the concept, but how do we actually let go of that need to control everything?
Tully suggests focusing on the process, not the outcome. Act with intention, put in the effort. But don't get caught up in how things will turn out. It's like planting a seed. You can nurture it, we'd have extra work. You give sunlight, but ultimately you can't control whether or not it will grow.
That's a great analogy. So it's about trusting that things will unfold as they should, even if it's not according to our preconceived plan.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the flow of life, knowing that we can't control every detail. And this surrender, paradoxically,
Yeah.
is where we find true freedom and happiness. We're no longer resisting what is. We're aligning ourselves with it.
I love that idea. It takes the pressure off knowing that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We can just do our best, let go of the need to control everything, and trust that things will work out in their own way.
That's the essence of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we practice this surrender, when we release attachment to outcomes, we create space for something even deeper to emerge. Inner peace.
That's interesting. We often think of happiness as this ecstatic, joyful state. But you're saying that true happiness is actually more about cultivating a stable sense of inner peace.
Exactly. Tolle believes that lasting happiness isn't about constantly chasing highs. It's about finding that quiet, centered place within ourselves that remains unshaken regardless of what's happening around us. Remember that sky and clouds
Oh,
metaphor?
absolutely. It's like even when those thoughts and emotions are swirling around like storm clouds, our true nature, like the vast sky, remains calm and peaceful. It's just a matter of accessing that peace.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that's what all of these practices, presence, acceptance, releasing attachment, are ultimately about. They're about clearing away the mental clutter, the limiting beliefs, and the ego's demands, so that we can experience the peace and happiness that are already within us.
It's like we're removing the obstacles that prevent us from seeing our true selves, our natural state of well-being.
Precisely. And this understanding that happiness is not something we need to earn or achieve, but rather something we uncover, can be incredibly empowering.
It totally is. It takes the pressure off knowing that we don't have to constantly strive for something that's already there waiting to be revealed.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Tolle's teachings. He offers a path to happiness. It's not about adding anything to our lives, but rather letting go of what's blocking it. It's a journey of subtraction, not addition.
I love that. A journey of subtraction. It's like we're peeling back the layers, stripping away the unnecessary to reveal the simple truth of who we are.
Beautifully said. And that's where true happiness resides, in that simplicity, in that connection with our true essence.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Eckhart Tolle's teachings on happiness, I'm curious, what's the one takeaway you really hope our listeners will remember from all this? Like, what's that golden nugget of wisdom?
Well, that's a great question. Um, I think for me, it's remembering that true happiness isn't something out there, waiting to be found. It's not something we have to earn or achieve. It's already within us, this natural state of peace and contentment that's always available, when we clear away the mental clutter.
Oh, yeah. Like we've been searching for something that's been right here all along, hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And that's why practices like presence, acceptance, and releasing attachment are so powerful. They're not about adding more to our lives, but about letting go of what's blocking us from experiencing the happiness that's already there.
Yeah, it's like we're peeling back the layers, stripping away the unnecessary to reveal the simple truth of who we are. And that truth is we are already whole. We are already enough.
Beautifully said. And the more we connect with that truth, the less we need to seek validation or happiness from external sources. We realize that lasting fulfillment comes from within, not from chasing fleeting pleasures or achievements.
Yeah, I know. I personally feel a sense of relief when I remember that happiness isn't about having it all figured out or reaching some arbitrary level of success. It's about cultivating that deep sense of inner peace and contentment, regardless of my external circumstances.
Absolutely. And that inner peace is cultivated through practices like mindfulness, self-awareness, and acceptance. All things that Tolle emphasizes in his teachings. It's about becoming more present in our lives, noticing our thoughts and emotions without judgment, and choosing to embrace the present moment, even with all its imperfections.
So it's about shifting our focus from what's wrong to what is, from what I lack to what I already have.
That's a great way to put it. And this shift in perspective, this practice of gratitude and appreciation, can have a profound impact on our overall well-being. It allows us to experience joy and contentment in the simplest of things, the everyday moments that we often take for granted.
I love that. It's like we're training ourselves to see the beauty and abundance that already surrounds us instead of getting caught up in the endless pursuit of more.
Exactly. And as we cultivate this sense of appreciation, we naturally start to let go of that constant striving, that feeling of never being enough. We realize that true happiness isn't about having it all. It's about appreciating what we already have.
And appreciating who we already are.
Precisely. So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought from Tolle. He often says that true happiness is not about adding anything to your life, but rather letting go of what's blocking it.
That's powerful.
It is. And it invites us to ask ourselves, what am I holding on to that's preventing me from experiencing true happiness? Maybe it's a limiting belief, a past hurt, or a fear of the future, whatever it is. Recognizing it is the first step towards letting it go.
It's not always easy to let go, but the freedom and happiness that come with it are definitely worth the effort. So if this deep dive has sparked your interest in Eckhart Tolle's teachings, I encourage you to explore his work further. You might just discover a wellspring of wisdom and inspiration that can transform your life. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the depths of happiness. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring.